Hi, my name is Mel Giannone, President and Broker of Record here at Paramount Real Estate Properties, headquartered in the Greater Toronto Area. We specialize in the exclusive representation of tenant occupiers and investors of commercial property. And you're someone in my marketplace I'd like to do business with. You can check us out by clicking the link to our latest real estate podcast called CRE Next, Work Out Loud, where we share helpful insights on commercial real estate matters affecting you and your business. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on in the office sector and the challenges of getting employees back to the office. I've been in the commercial real estate space now for over 5 real estate cycles or 5 economic cycles, dating back all the way when I started my career in '93. And back then there was a housing bubble that led to a commercial real estate softening. And what I notice is that there's a big pendulum swing each time there's a new economic cycle either beginning or coming to an end. And lately we've been hearing a lot of talk about concerns in the US about the office sector, specifically with commercial mortgage-backed securities and the rate of delinquency and defaults happening, so much so that certain owners are giving back the keys to some of these office towers because once you mark to market the value of these properties with a 30 or 40% vacancy, there's no way they can get the refinancing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that office sector today. So what I've noticed over the years is that the pendulum for demand will swing back and forth depending on where we are in the economic cycle. As times are good, GDP grows, companies grow, sectors grow, and they all start competing for labor and top talent. And as a result, as times are good, a lot of these companies will seek, there's a flight to quality for the buildings that they're going after in order to attract the talent that they like to have in their company. So what we saw lately over the last 10 years in the last great cycle that we've had is that you've had these companies moving away from the lower cost base of the suburbs and actually planting their headquarters in downtown Toronto, let's say, where all the new office towers are being built in order to attract the better talent. And the second thing is that they needed to get closer to that talent. So leaving the suburbs and going closer to where, let's say, universities and college headquarters or biggest campuses are. So we saw a lot of these companies, especially in the tech sector, leave the suburbs and go downtown and plant their flag there, closer to University of Toronto, Ryerson, Toronto Metropolitan University, or if you're in the hospitality sector, you'd be going closer to where George Brown is. So that's what happens in good times. Not only are we competing locally for talent, but in this last cycle we were competing internationally with US, right? Everything is online, and a lot of those tech companies were competing with a lot of the tech talent here, and they could do that remotely. And so that's what we saw in good times. But in bad times or in leaner times like we're experiencing now, especially in the office sector, as orders come in a little softer, the need for more employees is tampered a little bit. What people do or what companies do is they rely more on technology to leverage that and less on the need for talent. And as a result, they focus on cost of occupancy. So lower occupancy costs, they swing back. This pendulum swings back to the suburban market where there might be a lower property tax base or just lower operating costs overall for the office space that they're in. And including parking, because we know parking is a lot of money each month, not only for the companies, but individually for people coming downtown trying to find parking just to get to work. So what are some of the challenges for return to office mandates? We expected by now, after the great health crisis, that a lot of these employees would want to come back to work and be amongst colleagues. But the number one reason that employees are reluctant to come back to the office is the burnout from the daily commute and the time it takes to get to work. The second reason is the overall cost of commuting, both measured in time and in dollars. There was a recent stat that I read that almost 2 in 3 workers, that's about 61% of workers, spend between 30 and 90 minutes commuting each day, with 20% spending between 90 and 120 minutes. Now, those would be in the bigger metropolitan centers, and obviously this stat is from the US. I don't think there's a Canadian stat that has been produced, but I'm sure the dynamics are the same. And what some companies have found is that those employees that come in a few times a week arrive earlier, before peak traffic times, and they actually stay much later past rush hour periods for the most part in these, if these hybrid models remain. That's something that we've been experiencing and continue to experience in the future. So what I can tell you from my experience just being on the phones and talking to companies is that, there's a lot more people picking up between Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that makes a lot more sense. What I've also noticed talking to companies is that with the hybrid model that they're still working through, a lot of the employees would like to have a Monday or a Friday where they're working from home, and most employers are still allowing for that. And then in office between Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And that kind of explains why I've got a lot more reception on the phones as more people are actually at the office picking up on office hour time and not necessarily after hours. So here's another stat that was produced by Owl Labs. It was a survey out of the US, and I'll read it to you. The average amount of money hybrid workers spend each day when working from the office is about $51 US. And that's about $36 a day more than working from home. So you can see the reluctancy in trying to come back to work just from a cost point of view. 53% of employees feel that they would need between $50 and $75 to make up that trip into the office worthwhile because of the cost and the perception that they're more productive staying at home. So these costs would include fuel costs or charging their car costs, both in time and money, transit costs, parking, morning coffee or breakfast, and then of course buying lunch while you're downtown, and other things like pet daycare or even babysitting if you're going to be staying downtown for longer. Some other interesting points coming out of that Owl Labs survey I'll read out to you is that almost 46% of workers are polyworking or having a side hustle or an additional job, and a further 36% plan on starting one in the future. I found that kind of interesting. Another one, more than 58%, more than half of hybrid employees, coffee badge. This is another new term. Coffee badge, also known as showing face at the office, grabbing a coffee, saying hello, and then leaving. So that's another interesting survey observation. So depending on the makeup of your office, people in sales or sales roles are more likely to come back daily versus task-oriented roles such as engineers or programmers who prefer to stay at home and focus on the task that they do. One of the last observations found in the survey that I thought was interesting is that more senior employees that have been with the company longest, are more likely to come to work on the daily, whereas junior employees or employees that are just newly employed would prefer to stay home rather than come to work on the daily. So that's an interesting fact. They actually tried, I saw surveys where they actually tried to mandate managers to come back to work, hoping that would influence some of the juniors to come back to work, but didn't work out so well because the juniors didn't really put a lot of weight or appreciation on whether or not that manager was just sitting in the corner for them to do their work. It just didn't work out on a permanent or have a permanent trend, let's say. So instead, what some employers are doing in order to curb these trends of staying home or reluctancy to come back to work is offer a commuter benefit for those who travel more than, let's say, 10 kilometers into work from home. So for every day that they come into the office, an employee receives $50 to offset those costs. For some, it's been a way to promote their mandates for compliance while having the employee perceived as doing it on their own terms. So others are choosing to reformat their office portfolio. So they would choose a hub and spoke model. So a lot of their suburban offices that they would have had, their remote satellite offices, they would then have those leases lapse and prefer to go into something like a business center like a Regis or a WeWork or some other form of business center and do short-term contracts, leaving those smaller offices much more temporary, smaller contracts, a year at a time, in case they need to rehire and grow into something bigger, or maybe just let go of that office altogether. And what they found is that a lot of the teams that would be there, maybe there might have been a pod of, let's say, 15, 20 people on a team, only 6 of them actually show up to these satellite offices anyway. So they really had to be flexible in terms of their lease commitments. But the hub would be downtown, and that hub would be, something more of a showpiece or a signature site in order to attract the talent. And the way they use that hub is more for building company culture and promoting some of the new, let's say, projects. Let's say if you've got a new product, it would be a product launch downtown in their corporate head offices, which were really nice and designed more to be a social experience. And I think that's where we're going in the future. So with the great financial, let's just say the great health crisis this time around, that we all knew that retail was already suffering as more and more orders were going online. So it had to adapt and become a little more experiential. And I think that's where we're going with office. It has to be a little more experiential. So just like shopping centers would create these new experiences, so to have people attracted to come to the shopping center, you would probably see now, or you're probably going to see, a lot more experiential office layouts or building designs to attract more people to come to work on the regular. Over the last few years, what I've noticed in doing my deals with new corporate tenants is that these hubs, these headquarters, even they are limited as to the length of time. If I can get a 10-year lease, those leases would have a lot of caveats, so they would have a lot of break points in them. So there would be, let's say, a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease with the right to terminate after every 3rd year and resize if they needed to with the current landlord. They're in need of a lot of leasehold improvements, like I said, in order to attract employees back to the office space, and they're asking for larger allowances, but that only comes with larger deals, right? Longer term leases. But with that come these break points. So there are penalties involved, but they do want that flexibility. So even though they're locked in for 10 years, they want some assurance that if the economy pivots, they are able to adapt with it. So what do employees want? From what I'm gathering, talking to employers, and what I'm reading on some of these surveys is that employees are looking for some compensation for having to come all the way down to the downtown core. Again, we talked about parking and food costs, as well as pet daycare or daycare after hours. So they want a stipend. Another thing they wanted was a dedicated desk. So what had happened over the last, let's say, 7 years, 6 years, is that you had office design change where you had less private offices, a more open area, and a lot of hoteling of desks. But as a result, you'd have to bring in your laptop and connect to the desk that you've been assigned to temporarily in most part, and then have to lug all your stuff with you, and hopefully when you plug in, everything works. And they want a view, so they want some natural light. And again, latest office designs would be to put more of the support staff along the windows. You get the 2 o'clock sleepies, but the natural light coming into the office really helps them stay awake, and less trips to the coffee bar. The other thing that they would love is that they would love to have a temperature controlled area, something that avoids having the frosties in the wintertime and then too much heat in the summertime. And if they have the ability to have a roll-up window or a roll-out window where they can get some fresh air, that's a plus for them. So natural light, temperature control. The other one was snacks and refreshments. They would like that. They get that at home in their home office, and they prefer to have that in their work environment as well. So some of the amenities that they desire in their office building: green space, outdoor space for collaborating. It used to be you just needed a shelter for those who smoke, but some picnic tables, a courtyard perhaps, but just green space. Some other things that they would want is retail. Retail at the bottom on the concourse level, or food services they can choose from, whether it's a quick service restaurant or a full-blown restaurant for after work, getting together with their pals. One of the newest things that I'm seeing in some of the common areas of these office towers are golf simulators. So that is another thing that's coming into being in these lounges, and I think that's one of the things that employees, I'm going to say male employees, are demanding. Maybe the C-suite executives are demanding that, I'm not too sure. But anyway, you're seeing a lot of these new golf simulators that are not cheap come into these tenant lounges. Employees want multiple lounges, right? One for collaborative space and one for just chilling out. A gym with spa level changing rooms or showers, bike racks for those who bike to work, and prayer rooms for sure. In some cases, a medical room or a massage room for those tech companies. What I see going, as I kind of mentioned before, is that the office environment will be more experiential than more traditional, just come to work, have a coffee, and get right at it. So just like the shopping and retail sector adapted and pivoted, I think you'll see the office sector do the same. So when we talk about trying to help with the return to office mandates and trying to help employees come back and really listening to what they desire out of a work environment, I think the landlord here has done a great job in helping tenants and companies with that task. So employers are looking for those environments that cater to their employee needs, and some of those desires would be open spaces for collaboration, open spaces just to take a break, and different environments away from the upstairs office cubicle or just the noise and confusion that's going on upstairs. So our friends here at Crown Properties have done a great job in upgrading their amenity package to include collaborative work areas, whether you're just coming downstairs for a coffee and you want to work alongside your teammates here at one of these tables, or whether you just want to break out alone and just sit at one of these nice comfy chairs. There are also some banquettes down the hall there, you can see in the corner, along next to the gym, the restaurant, and some of these other collaborative spaces that they use for the building. So here's another great idea that our friends over at Crown have thought of. So employers right now are trying to figure out what is the office space load capacity for their population of employees. And what they'll find is that there's a baseline of employees that come in every day, and then there's this overflow. So you're looking at load. And what some of the employers would like to have is this flexibility between not taking on too much space in the offices above, but then having this overflow space down below that they can rely on, maybe on Mondays and Fridays, for the extra population of employees that they have that might come in. So what Crown has done here as a landlord is created this collaborative room. It's much like a classroom, or can be used for just going over from a team's point of view some of the assignments that they might be initiating for the new month ahead, and they invite their employees in to talk about it. But again, it's space that wouldn't be upstairs in the office where you're paying on that space, but could be booked either as a free amenity or a charge per use. This is another great example of using space that's in the common area and having it as an amenity for your tenants upstairs. So as their employees come in and just need a little niche in which to just plant their laptop here and plug into the Wi-Fi, they can do that really quickly, standing up for a few minutes, maybe taking a break from upstairs, and continuing on with their tasks as if they were upstairs, but wanting maybe a little more flexibility or a little more privacy, and just kind of unplugging from upstairs and using the niche that's down here. We talked about some of the desires from employees to have a coffee station or a refreshment stand or snack bar. What landlords are doing in order to help those employers and tenants upstairs is provide filtered water. We have a lot of tenant employees that come in by bike or work out at the gym on the concourse level. But one of the nice amenities to have here is that they'll always have clean drinking water and to top up their bottles of water before they go back upstairs to work. So here's a great example of how Crown Properties once again reinvested in the upgrade of their amenity package for their building. The hope here is that if you can provide those things that employees are looking for, then you'll attract the tenants to be in the building. And if you attract enough tenants and have a full building, then the valuation of that asset will go up. So in this particular space, it's sub-level, so it wouldn't be used more or less, other than maybe storage for the building, wouldn't be used as rentable area for the tenants upstairs. The space here is divided into 3 sections. One is more of a recreational section. You can see the golf simulator behind me, and you can also see the foosball table here behind me. The other section is more of a lounge area, and I'll show you that. Now in the lounge area, you can have your tenants come down and just chill out and talk with each other, or maybe come down here for lunch and just take a break. There's some TVs here rolling all the time, so you can just watch the news, catch up on events. And of course, one of the nice features about this space here is that if you are going to hold a corporate event or just want to get together with your team, there is a kitchen here as well that you can use for hosting any events or get-togethers. And the tables are nice and long, so you can actually put a whole team together. Or if you're here by yourself, just want to chill out, there's some chairs. So I think this is another great example demonstrating how landlords are trying to maximize the value of their building, but also provide some amenities that will help employers attract employees back to the office. You know, prior to the whole health crisis back in 2020, 2021, most employers thought, you know, if we can give some green space to their employees, this would probably be what it would look like. Just a place for people to come out and have a smoke and then come back in. Times have changed. Here's a great example of another project by Crown and the way they've upgraded their building amenity package. So what we have here is green space adjacent to their tenant lounge, which is adjacent to a quick service restaurant and retail for the employees and employers of the building. So when we talk about one of the things that is most requested by employees from their employers, it's green space and different areas where they can go out and just chill out or do some work, sit under the sun under a nice blue sky, and just collaborate with teammates or just have a bite to eat or think, right? Just critically think about the task at hand. So this is a great example of how employees dictate some of the desires for them in order to come back to work. So here are my final thoughts on what's happening in the office sector today as we see it. I think as more landlords listen to what employers need in order to attract some of their employees, and as those employers listen to their employees and some of their wants or desires for reason to come back to work, they're all interconnected, but ultimately it'll lead to the valuation of the building itself. And as more of these amenities are being put in, the greater chance they have of attracting tenants to their buildings, employers to their buildings, and really help those employers with their return to office mandates. So things like we said, the gyms, the quick service restaurants, the green spaces, the tenant lounges that might have a golf simulator or a cafe or a foosball table. These are all, things that landlords and employers are listening to their employees in order to attract them and help win over that compliance for the return to office. Ultimately, though, what I think is going to happen is that it'll take some time. It'll take some time for employees to figure out whether or not they want to come back to work for those promotions or elevated responsibilities, and they'll have that fear of missing out. And as they see more of their colleagues come back to work, they're going to realize that if I'm not there, someone else is going to get tapped on the shoulder for that job or that promotion. And so in time, as these mandates get reintroduced on a quarterly basis, whether that's the first quarter, everybody's coming back to work in January, or another one in March, and you keep announcing these things, and they chip away, and as slowly more people get comfortable with the return, there'll be this switch in balance, that pendulum that I spoke of, that swings back to the employer's hands. But so long as we're in an economy where there are more jobs than there are people to fill those jobs, it'll be the employees that dictate the business terms for them to come to work. But I suspect, like with everything else, as they see more of their colleagues come back to work, that fear of missing out will be that deciding factor that really tips the scales for when we do come back to a full office like we had experienced back before the great health crisis. So those are my thoughts. I want to thank you for watching CRE Next Work Out Loud. And if you are a decision maker for your company, I'd like to hear from you. If you make those real estate decisions and you're looking for a change in your office portfolio or your industrial portfolio, and if you're an investor of real estate as well, I encourage you to reach out to us at our website, paramountrealestate.ca. And if you're just an avid watcher of these videos and just want to learn more about what's going on in the commercial real estate space, I would encourage you to like subscribe, and tap on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any other content that I produce.